Biz Buzz on Marlow FM 97.5.
And a good afternoon and welcome to the Biz Buzz programme. Get going with myself, Dermot Fitzpatrick, with you for the next 90 minutes, and my co-presenter with the wonderful name of Wisdom Costa. Wisdom, good afternoon.
You nearly got that right. Good afternoon.
Wisdom Costa. I'll just slow down.
You have to say it 100 times now.
Yeah, do this 100 times. So this afternoon we're going to be talking about covering some of the Greek economy, what's been happening in the Greek economy, what's been happening around the election news in particular, because Wisdom is an expert, is our resident expert here at Marlow FM
the pressure
on tax.
The pressure, an expert.
And of course we couldn't possibly not cover the Swiss bank account issues. And I understand that HMRC could be on the rack at the moment for being questioned about some of their behaviours. And also about what Ed Miliband and other politicians have to say around tax. So we're going to be covering many of those things in the next 90 minutes. So Wisdom, what have you been up to recently since we last were on the programme 2 weeks ago?
It's been a busy week, dealing with tax returns and talking to various people. I'm also a councillor in Windsor and Maidenhead, hence the odd comment slipped in. So it's been quite busy as we come up to a budget, and I'm sure you've had a budget review here in Bucks, and of course preparing for today. I mean, Ed Miliband has been going to overdrive with the comments he's been making. He's been shooting off everywhere. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. My apologies, Mr. Miliband and any Labour Party supporters. But equally, he's been taking a bit of criticism for some of the comments he's made, and as have David Cameron and George Osborne, strangely enough.
So let's start off with this thing about the Swiss bank accounts. Just what's been happening there? What's in your view has been happening there?
This goes down to the issue of tax evasion, tax avoidance, and those who can do and those who can't, well, we suffer. HSBC have been in the news because a number of bank account information and details have been leaked, and apparently they've been helping a number of providing their wealthier clients with the opportunity to save tax by taking money offshore. But it's not just HSBC who are in the spotlight here. It's also PricewaterhouseCoopers, who have been accused by Margaret Hodge of engaging with tax avoidance on an industrial scale.
So there's a difference between what I mean. We need to be clear. There's a difference between what they're absolutely. It's legal, isn't it? It's as far as they're concerned, as far as the law is concerned, what they're doing is legal. Avoidance
is legal. Evasion is illegal. And in between, you've got a question of morality, as Justin Welby has said. It's moral. It's actually moral that we should pay our taxes and not be in debt. So it's that grey area, and we've touched upon this already with Starbucks, who incidentally finally made a profit magically this year.
Reported this week. The Starbucks have made. Yes. I was really delighted to hear that they've made a profit.
It's all that coffee you've been drinking, Dermot.
Yeah, and that they're going to pay tax on it.
Well, possibly.
Well. So what has Ed been saying? Ed Miliband. We will be covering the others as well, but just say what's been reported as.
Okay, let's have a look at some of the many things that Ed Miliband's been saying. Well, they're looking to change the way hedge funds pay tax on UK shares that they trade. At the moment, they have an exemption on stamp duty for the shares they trade. So one of the things he's saying is we're going to get rid of that exemption, and so any hedge funds who have to buy and sell shares, they have to pay the same stamp duty as all the rest of us do. So obviously, the hedge funds and the intermediaries association have hit back and said, well, it's only £145 million of a tax break, but don't forget that we generate billions of pounds worth of tax for the economy. So that's the first thing that Ed has talked about. I'm just going to pull through some of my information.
Yeah, take your time.
Absolutely. The other thing he also talked about is he's going large on this whole issue of tax evasion and tax avoidance. And he's looking, certainly with many sound bites, to say, we're going to crack down on this. We're going to crack down on anybody and everything that comes our way that vaguely looks like it's tax evasion.
So is it tax avoidance until it becomes tax evasion? So there's something that's discovered that moves it from quite an above-board legal use of the rules of taxation into something saying, this is something that we're doing here that's slightly underhanded.
Yeah, I think this is where there's a little bit of a grey area and people get confused. In fact, I think Ed Miliband and all the other politicians rely on that confusion to try and make great sound bites. And it's not just me who's saying that the politicians are making sound bites, trying to put on the card something that practically will be very difficult to achieve. So it's many other experts are saying this. So Bermuda, he's attacked Bermuda, poor old Bermudans, saying that he might put Bermuda on an international blacklist if Labour wins the election unless they produce a public register of offshore company owners. Needless to say, Bermuda have hit back and saying they're bemused at what he's saying.
As would most people be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what else is Ed being saying?
One of the things that I was noticing was that some people that were being accused of having these accounts offshore, who later were involved in banks, who later became politicians themselves, and have also been useful to parties on both sides, both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. So it's almost like Ed Miliband is saying, you've used this man and he's become a minister in your government, and David Cameron comes back and says, are we talking about the same man that was a minister in your government too, or an advisor in your government?
Yeah, correct.
It seems a lot of bluster.
That's correct, and this is where the issue of avoidance and evasion is being blurred, because even Ed Miliband's father, Ed and David Miliband's father, put money into a trust for the children, so that if and when it comes to the point where his mother passes away, only 60% of the estate gets hit for inheritance tax. So they're all at it in a sense. But the question is, what do you, as listeners, regard as acceptable and not acceptable in this murky world?
And it's, of course, it's using the word avoidance or evasion are very evocative. Because, in the work that you do, and we're not going to go into that specifically here, but in the work that you do, or any of us, we buy a book or we find out information, we go to a tax advisor and say, I've got this little amount of money. What's the best way that I can, what's the most tax efficient way that I can use this money or save this money? And they will come up with solutions or options to help us to do that.
It's an interesting point, isn't it?
That's kind of normal, is that not?
Well, perhaps we were to introduce a new term which looks at the rights that individuals have in terms of tax allowances and not tax planning, but if you like, yes, allowances that are available to them, which would be, I can't use the word vanilla anymore because of Lord Fink, who's given vanilla a bad name, and then in the middle you've got the more constructed or more artificial choice of allowances that you might use to pay less tax. And then at the extreme, you've got the absolutely artificial, where you go out of your way. For example, Mr. Moyles, am I allowed to use his name as a used car salesman, to create schemes which are definitely not the way you're practicing your life.
Because there have been a number of celebrities, and we won't mention any more names, who have taken to go.
Even well-known football managers.
And football managers, and there are other football managers too out there, but I'm not saying that any of them do anything wrong. Definitely not a sunny afternoon here in Marlow, but we're also sunny here in the studio, and we've been exploring with my co-presenter, Wisdom to Costa. Got it right that time.
Woohoo!
About what the politicians have been saying about what their proposals are should they get elected in the upcoming elections. Wisdom, what about David Cameron, Conservative Party, George Osborne?
They've been relatively quiet. Obviously, they like everyone else are saying we're going to cut down on tax dodgers. But I'm quite interested in what David Cameron might have to say in the coming months, and whether anyone's going to ask him whether he managed to live up to his pledge at the beginning of the last election, or rather when he first came into power.
What was that?
Saying that the richer people, those with broader shoulders, would pay or bear a greater proportion of the tax burden. So I'll be interested to see what he says about that.
Do you think? We're not allowed to get too political on this program, so rather than going into that conversation.
But George Osborne's in trouble, though. Apparently, the Huffington Post have uncovered footage from 2003, before he was Chancellor, where he was offering tax advice to a member of the public in America. So responding, actually not in America, in the UK. So responding to a viewer's question, Osborne states, there are some pretty clever financial products that enable you to, in effect, pass on your home or the value of your house to your son and daughter, and then get personal care paid for by the state. before he obviously added, I probably shouldn't be advocating this on television. That is right.
At all.
Or at all, correct, yes. That definitely comes under possibly tax avoidance rather than evasion.
It's funny how they're able to do that, and then a couple of years later they're kind of coming out strongly in exactly the opposite.
I think we must have short memories.
The exact opposite, and what I'm noticing now is the strength of conviction when they're speaking on the radio. When we get in, we will make sure that these people have this, and the students will have this, and everybody will have a job.
Don't mention the students issue again.
And everybody will have, there will be no queues for anything. It will be all wonderful. You say, well, why isn't it happening now?
Correct, yeah. I wonder, I mean, how many years and decades have we had these promises from politicians, and how many times have they not quite failed to deliver, and we get more? So what do we do? How do we vote? How do we choose?
That's the question. And I think there are probably more questions being asked now. And also it seems, and I'm not quite sure how deeply we want to go into it, but let's dip our toe into it and see what happens. So there are certain people coming out in the community, religious leaders, politicians, business people, and even celebrities starting to come out and say, oh, I wouldn't vote for him, or if they get in, this is going to be a catastrophe, or this is going to happen. Is that new, or has that happened before?
I don't think it's happened to quite the extent it's happening at the moment. But it is interesting that the bishops and Justin Welby have been taking a stronger position, or a clearer stance, or in relation to the economy and tax. And historically, I suppose, bishops and the clergy have been accused of being rather left-wing in wanting to have public services for everybody and everything for everyone. But now they seem to coming out with a more balanced approach, and really also looking at the economy. I think Bill Clinton once said, when asked, well, what's the key question? It's the economy, stupid. And Justin Welby is a former a banker, an oil executive. I think he's an oil executive for BP, was he? Certainly a very, very able gentleman. And he has also come out not just to say that we need to improve the economy, but also to say that, morally speaking, we need to be paying our taxes.
And it is a kind of, I mean, it's almost like it is the economy, stupid, that people need to be paying their taxes, people need to be buying things, people need to be making things. It all needs to be balanced. And if it gets out of balance, the thing tips over. And I think it's obvious that there are a certain amount of people who have an awful lot of money, and that money can buy them quite a lot of influence.
Yes. It's going back to the old tax haven in the heart of the city one.
And of course, if I can save lots of money in tax, then I would have lots of money to be able to donate to a party of my choice. And if I can do that and also save money, is that taxable? Is a donation to a?
No,
it's not.
No.
So
thankfully,
so they're able to. So help me on this one. So they're able to do something that helps them to bring their money into a place where they're able to avoid or save tax. That's a nicer word, save tax.
So are you saying effectively that if we all were tax avoiders or tax evaders, we'd pay no tax, and then we would give it all to charity? Of course, philanthropy would increase dramatically, and so we can choose which groups of people should get services and not. Is that what you're saying, Dermot?
Well, I'm not, but I'm going to pull this back, because I'm thinking as well. If we were in a room full of people, and there are people that perhaps might be in a room with you, being invited there, and you say, how many people would like to find out ways of how they can learn more about the things that they could, get tax relief on? Mm-hmm. How many people, please have a show of hands. I think most people in the room would put their hand up and say, yeah, I'd like to. If I'm paying more tax than I absolutely need to, I'd like to know how I could.
But isn't that just people claiming their rights? And isn't the flip side of that same argument is, yeah, absolutely, you should be claiming your rights, claiming your tax allowances that you are allowed to claim. But I suppose for me, my question would say, well, why didn't anyone tell me about this before? Why haven't HMRC told me about this before? Why haven't the government told me about this before? Why don't we include this in the education process for 15 and 16-year-olds?
Well, somebody might say because the HMRC is there to collect as much tax as they possibly can, and they're not necessarily, I'm sure they provide advice, but they're not necessarily an advisory service, and they invite people to take responsibility for their own.
So they're taking a one-handed view of, give me your money, Can you claim tax allowances? Well, I don't really care. So are you saying it's the government's fault then?
You might say that, but I couldn't possibly comment. And if you've just joined us, this is Dermot Fitzpatrick. You're listening to Biz Buzz program on Marlow FM 97.5. I'm here with my co-presenter, Wisdom. And we've been covering a number of issues, specifically around the election and what the politicians are saying. And just before that piece of that track, we were talking about HMRC, that HMRC are a little bit on the rack, being questioned about whether they're going for the small fish and what they're doing about the big fish that seem to be escaping paying their taxes. Wisdom, what else are you going to tell us about this HMRC issue?
Ed Miliband again on the attack, saying that he's going to have a review of HMRC's approach to tax evasion and avoidance if Labour come to power. He was addressing the Welsh conference, and he said that tax authority needed to do a much better job, and he's also accused the coalition of shrugging its shoulders on tax avoidance, which he claimed has left a £34 billion hole in the UK finances. So this is in response to the HSBC scandal. And interesting with the HSBC scandal, HMRC have taken the unprecedented step of issuing a very long press release, publishing it on the internet. And this is what they've said. It says they're telling us about the data which was passed over to them from an HSBC whistleblower in relation to tax evasion and tax avoidance. So this is what they say. In 2009, the French tax authority obtained account data stolen from HSBC's Swiss subsidiary in 2007. So this is a long time ago. This is 7, 8 years ago now. So HMRC opened discussions with the French authorities in 2009, and in February 2010, we made a formal request under the International Tax Information Treaty for information relating to UK account holders. HMRC was given a disc at the end of April 2010 and immediately began to examine its contents.
Immediately, huh?
Well, apparently immediately, although I'm not sure. I'm sure they'll say that we can't comment on individual cases. It don't actually say what success they've had in pursuing individuals on that list.
Would you like to guess?
Couldn't possibly hazard a guess. Although, and this goes, and also, the Sunday Times reported that a property tycoon by the name of I think we call him Boom Boom was one of his nicknames. A property tycoon who's involved with developing the Wembley Stadium hadn't paid taxes for more than 20 years.
And hadn't for 20 years.
And he's a multi-millionaire, and now he's headed off to Monaco. Yes. So you can see why HMRC is under attack. On the positive side, the news is that the universal credit is 6 months ahead of schedule, but I'm not sure that employers and employees would be quite so positive about it.
Well, I have to tell you that I'm they sent a letter to me, so I know that they're still there.
Okay,
and they're working because they sent a letter to me as a reminder to me about my tax. And
great.
So I'm encouraged that they're on the case.
And I suppose we ought to mention something very positive. HMRC are thinking of abandoning the £100 mandatory fine if you fail to submit your tax return by the 31st of January. So that's on the card. So
it is a comfort to me.
It's not in at the moment. So if you've missed your tax return deadline, you're still going to get a £100 fine plus interest plus other penalties. But remember,
is it time for me to leave the country?
No, not yet. Not yet. You can get a draft tax return in the provisional figures and then get your accountant to finalise later. That will keep them off your back. Not I'm suggesting, Dermot, that you're actually involved with late submission of returns at all. Or tax evasion or avoidance.
Well, I think you gave me a nice tip about that the last time we were on, which relieved me, that say that I should just get my tax returns in, even if they're not absolutely put
something provisional in there.
Put something provisionally in, because that not only keeps them happy, but it takes the pressure off.
Yep, correct.
Somebody said to me that if you owe the bank £10,000 or something like that, you've got a problem. And if you owe a bank £10 million, they have a problem. And it seems to be the same way. The more money, the tax that you owe, it seems to, maybe they just say, oh, look, it's too much work. It'll take us forever to find out.
It'd be interesting to get someone from HMRC on the programme, I think.
Yeah, I think we need to get more of a balance here. I think we do need to get someone from HMRC. So if anybody from the HMRC is listening and would like to phone in or would like to join us in the studio now or at another time, then please contact the studio. You can contact the studio on 01628 488 975. That's 01628 488-975, or if you'd like to send us an email, or indeed if you're listening and you'd like to ask Wisdom a question around tax, you could email us at studio@marlowfm.co.uk. That's studio@marlowfm.co.uk. And Wisdom, it seems that there are some people in the country who do the tax business their way, and they seem to be above everything else and seem to get away with it. Do you have any final stories on this?
Yeah, these are two stories.
Tax evasion.
Absolutely. Two stories from the Daily Mail, and it's quite breathtaking in their approach. And certainly Paul Boom Boom Bloomfield, we referred to earlier on.
Paul Boom Boom Bloomfield.
I think Boom Boom was the nickname for his approach to business.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently this gentleman was one of the many Britons who had an account with HSBC in Switzerland, and so he was on this list which was leaked 6 years ago to HMRC. So he hasn't paid tax for 24 years, and he's a very wealthy individual who enjoys a lavish lifestyle with private jets and and luxury homes, not fast homes, and was involved, as I said earlier on, with the financing of the new Wembley. Now, interestingly, the man who was in charge of HMRC at the time was a gentleman called Dave Hartnett, and straight out of the Daily Mail again. And he didn't actually, it's alleged, he didn't pursue the HSBC list with perhaps as much vigour as others might want him to. But apparently now it's been revealed that he's actually was involved in the sense of he's gone to work for HSBC.
He went to work for HSBC.
Correct. So the same organisation who's been helping wealthy individuals escape tax. Let's use that expression, escape tax.
Mm-hmm.
And the same organisation whose list of private wealthy individuals was passed over to HMRC, he didn't actually pursue that, and he's now gone on to become a consultant or work for HSBC.
Well, there you go.
So the title is A Tax Man with His Snout in the Trough.
Well, everybody else, all this is happening, while everybody else, like John Lennon says, well, we're busy making other plans. We're all busy working, doing other things, and all of these things happen. But what interests me is every now and then, every year, there's a half a dozen of these things kind of float to the surface, whether it's MP's expenses or, buying duck houses on taxpayers' money or whatever it is, or tax evasion. And everybody, there's a big furore, and the newspapers are full of it. And politicians go to and fro, and then it dies down.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it's just a distraction, something that distracts us from, like a magician, something that distracts us from something like the economy, for instance. Yeah, or the real life, something that's really happening, or the NHS, or something that's really happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it dies. It's almost somebody's going to fall here. Something's going to really big is going to happen.
You do wonder why some of these stories, when they arise, actually don't result in major changes.
Yes.
And I look at the scandal, or the K2 scandal, a couple of years ago, and I've got utmost respect for Jimmy Carr, who said, "Yes, I messed up. I was involved. I'm out of it now, and I've put everything right." Whereas certain other individuals refused to acknowledge that they were ever a part of it, but took the approach of trying to sue people for disclosing things.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That the whistleblowers are being accused of thieving or stealing information. Stealing information about people who are stealing. It's a kind of like a what?
Yep.
Or politicians lying about going to war or something like that, saying, weapons of mass destruction that don't exist and all of that. And they still then end up getting £100,000 fees as guest speakers around the world, mentioning no names.
You're definitely getting political there, aren't you? But was the end justify the means?
Does the end justify the means?
I don't know.
Well,
just asking the question.
Oh, thank you.
Throwing a grenade in there.
And I see that the pin has been pulled out of that one.
Yes.
So, moving on. What else? What else have we got on our storylines for this afternoon? That's kind of
I think the Greek economy is something that's very, very major. That is it's just really bubbling away there. The Greek debt crisis, they've actually now called it the Grexit, the Greek exit. So everybody likes their little acronyms and sound bites. So Grexit.
The Grexit, is it?
Yeah, it's not something you go and buy down at the local DIY shop.
I doubt if it's the Greeks that are calling it the Grexit.
I don't think so. No. You know, I've got some Greek friends, and they are heartbroken by all that's been happening in Greece in the last few years. And they look at, I mean, we're celebrating Magna Carta, the 800th anniversary of what we regarded as the foundation of human rights and democracy. But the Greeks have got a just claim to say that actually democracy started with us many centuries before then. So here we talked about tax evasion. I know I'm rambling on a little bit here, but I'm going to bring it all together beautifully in a second. Okay.
Thank you.
Tax evasion. And you talked about, well, should we pay tax or not? And you said, well, if we didn't pay tax, then we could take the tax we saved and give it to good causes. Well, one of the arguments is the reason, or one of the factors in the fall of the Greek economy is actually tax evasion.
Yeah.
And by ordinary people like you and I.
Like all of them.
All of them saying, you know, when you go to a Greek hotel, have you noticed that very often there's a piece of scaffolding somewhere in the building?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah, whenever you go to a Greek hotel, most of the time you never see a fully built hotel. Well, that's the theory of it all. And you see some beautiful facades and great interiors, but one little corner of the Greek hotel room or the Greek hotel or the business has a piece of scaffolding on, and there's a window missing or boarded up. Why is that?
I have no idea, Wisdom. Why is that?
Apparently, if the building is not finished, you don't pay any rates. So the building isn't finished, you don't pay. If you've got this piece of scaffolding up, you claim the business. The building isn't finished.
It's not only in Greece, but in other countries I've noticed that as well. I wonder if it's the same thing. So in Portugal,
tax evasion or tax avoidance is taken to a whole different level, a whole country level, and the result being that there wasn't enough tax revenue coming. It's obviously just one issue, but one of the factors is that there wasn't enough tax revenue coming into the Greek economy. And I'm sure many Greeks will say, no, that I've got it all wrong. But please come on and tell us where we've got it wrong.
I have to take back, because I said none of them pay tax, and of course that's not it. That's a fabrication on my part. I don't know, but I'm just imagining a country where people are less inclined to pay tax, and the government of the country needs tax to run itself. So if enough people don't pay tax, and then the government are borrowing more money, like in any.
Well, this is exactly what's happened with Greece. They've the public sector. This is one point of view, obviously. The argument is that the wages were increased in the public sector, and they had to pay for the Athens Olympics, and so the borrowings went up and up and up, and they were basically living beyond their means. So the level of income was below the level of expenses, which resulted in them having to borrow money.
Like any family or any business would, so they go to the bank,
like this country as well,
and they go and say, or whatever. Who are they borrowing the money from?
Well, they'll put money on the open market and issue bonds, and so wealthy investors, other governments, China, whoever, will say, "Great, we'll take those bonds effectively and give you the money."
And then we expect austerity measures. We expect you to cut back and stop going out so much to restaurants. And we expect, in a personal sense, we expect you to stop the expenditure, cut back, until you get to a point where you can start paying this money back.
Start repaying the interest. The Greek economy can't even pay the interest at the moment. So that's been part of the problem. And obviously with the banking crisis, then they've had a huge amount of money in terms of bailout funds from the EU, as have other countries like Spain.
And Ireland. But Ireland are doing quite well, aren't they?
I understand. You can tell me better than...
Thank you very much. No, I don't know how we've done it, but we have. Yep. And so at the moment, what Greece are saying is, well, what are Greece saying?
They're saying that we can't afford to pay the interest on those debts, so we're going to default.
Right. And then what happens? What does that mean, actually?
Well, that basically means that there's a lot of money that they owe to the EU and other countries, and the interest alone is enormous. I mean, in the UK,
we'd like you to write that off and lend us more money. So because they have to get money from somewhere now.
I think it's a tough balancing act. They have to sort of cut down the public expenditure from the government and somehow jiggle it in such a way that the money they've got coming in, the lower rates, perhaps trying to educate people to say, well, you need to pay tax if you've got a job, of course, because many of them don't have jobs.
There have been demonstrations in Greece about
demonstrations and riots, absolutely.
Riots, and the government is actually saying, well, we've got to do something, because if we don't respond to these demonstrators, they're going to bring us down. And so the only thing they can do is turn to the people they owe the money to and say, we're going to default on this. We're not only going to default, we're not even going to continue with the austerity measures because we're unhappy here. We spent all the money we have on things we probably didn't need. We didn't pay our taxes. And we're not prepared to live like this anymore.
And I think both parties are playing hardball at the moment, both the EU and Greece, because the effect or the impact for both country or for both zones is going to be enormous. If Greece defaults on its debt, what we're saying is that people have to, individual investors have to write off all of their borrowings.
And what about the other countries that owe?
And it's going to affect the Eurozone. What's going to happen to Spain, who owe a huge amount of money? And what's going to happen to the industry generally? I think the fear is that the UK does a lot of business with the Eurozone, and if the Eurozone is plunged into recession again, then it will have a contagious effect on the UK as well.
Happy days. Let's
back to Frank Sinatra.
No, I played Frank Sinatra. I thought it was going to be uplifting. The minute it started, I thought that was not a good idea. Anyway, it's such fun talking about the Greek economy. It's better than my own economy, really. So, what do we think is going to happen eventually? Do you think they're going to have to? It looks to me as if Greece are just going to have to tough it out.
Well, that's a really tough thing to do, isn't it? They've just elected a new prime minister, and he was brought in on the back of the austerity measures to say that we want our country back. We want to be beholden to anyone. But now it looks as if he's negotiating, albeit playing hardball. And I think he understands, as any revolutionary probably does once they get into power, that they have to be a little bit more pragmatic than when they first stepped up to the mark. So what could happen? Well, there is it's assessed that it's 50%, 55% likelihood that they'll go back to Greece will go back to the bailout program, but in which case there's going to be lots more pain for Greek people with more austerity measures, fewer jobs, lower amounts of money going around. Another option is to take the intermediary approach, which is that they have a staycation. So basically they take a little bit of a break, a negotiated break from the debt. So that will give a little bit of relief to the Greek economy, allow them to spend a little bit more money and to try and, I suppose, to bolster business and trade. The other option is, of course, and it's regarded as 20% likely, is that they're actually going to finally pull the plug and leave the Eurozone, which will obviously have a ripple effect on the rest of the Eurozone and perhaps even wider than that.
And what would happen then? I mean, if Greece do that, can Greece just continues on? It's almost like cutting itself off from everything and floating away. Does it tend to get on with its own?
Well, yes, there's a number of things which would have to happen straight away. They'll have to bring them the drachma back. So I don't know whether they have stocks of the currency or whether they'll have to be printing away like mad or minting away like mad. So the currency would have to come back, the drachma. Next, what else? They'd have to do that quite quickly. And they'll also have to maintain capital controls so that money coming in and to and out of the country would have to be strictly controlled. At the moment, you've got the free movement of people, goods, capital, as determined by the Eurozone treaties, but that would have to stop, and they have to rein in their borders, really.
It's almost like, to me, as if somebody who can't pay the mortgage on their house and it has run up credit card debts and all other kinds of debt, and saying, well, I'm not going to pay my credit card debts, I'm not going to pay off the interest on the loan on my mortgage, and I want to continue living in my house.
It doesn't seem quite right, does it? Why should the rest of us pay for your financial poor management?
Because that money is coming from somewhere.
Yes, that's right.
But it's a real. I guess in years to come they will look back and see. So what was the starting point in this? How did this all start to go wrong? Because I can remember going back to Ireland 15, 20 years ago, and everybody was it was a Celtic tiger. Everybody was going out to restaurants. Nobody was dining at home. Everybody was spending. People had villas in Portugal and Spain. And I said, well, I was always asking, where's the money coming from? Where is this coming from? Because we're producing some silicon chips, or we're producing some IT equipment, or whatever it was that these companies were in Ireland.
So where was the money coming from your experience? Was it, as I've heard from some of my Irish relatives, that the banks were saying, we want to lend you money, not would you like to, but we want to lend you money. And so they were just basically borrowing and living off that debt.
Yes, and it was that young people were getting mortgages for houses. We had one of my brother's daughter, my brother's daughter, bought a house, with money that she couldn't afford. With money that she couldn't afford to pay back.
Yep.
She didn't have the income or the salary to cover the interest on that.
Yep.
And people were doing it. And they also, if you went to Portugal, the huge amount of Irish people had villas there.
Yeah.
Second homes. And they were quite big places too. They weren't just small apartments. And so the question was, where was it coming from? And, it was EEC money, or some money was coming in from somewhere. And I could never find out exactly where it was coming, what was, how it was happening. And of course, eventually it was like pass to parcel.
Right.
Somebody borrowed money and built a house, and then somebody bought the house.
Yep.
And, at some point in time, somebody bought another house, and at some point in time, the music stopped. And that's when the bubble
And of course,
burst.
the property values which the mortgages were perhaps secured on were fictitious, or not fictitious, but certainly the property market went into decline,
Yeah.
which resulted in losses for individuals and banks.
And when the people went to sell them, of course, it was a fire sale.
Yeah.
And a lot of people then had to go, again, immigration, had to go to places like Australia and the Middle East to get work and try and keep that whole thing going. Brilliant. I mean, they're very resilient, but it was a false economy, a falsely created economy. And I guess that's probably happened throughout Europe.
It's certainly worrying. And
So
certainly
time for the news, just coming up now. Joined us, you're listening to the Biz Buzz programme on Marlow FM 97.5. This is Dermot Fitzpatrick with my co-presenter Wisdom. And we've been talking about lots of things connected with tax evasion, the Greek economy, and what the politicians have been saying coming up to the election, specifically around the area of taxation, personal tax, corporate tax. But Wisdom, you found a story about Michelle Ferrero.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal
I'm gonna enjoy
rags
this
to
story.
riches
Yeah.
story. And I have to let you into a secret.
Tell me.
My favourite sandwich, I call it the Snickers sandwich. Because it 2 bits of bread, brown or white, whichever you want to be healthy with, then a nice thick coating of crunchy hazelnut, and then some Nutella on top. What a sandwich.
Now, this is one we can try at home. I want you to
Absolutely.
repeat that again, because there could be some listeners there that are just going to go and they've got the munchies.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
take
So-
some, what kind of bread?
Any bread you want, toast or bread, and then a nice thick layer of crunchy peanut butter.
Crunchy peanut butter, okay.
And then smothered with Nutella, and then another piece of bread or toast on top, Wonderful.
How long have you been addicted?
Addicted?
No, sorry. How long have you been working on
My
this
name's
recipe?
Wisdom.
My name is
I'm a
Wisdom.
chocolate addict.
So Michelle Ferrero,
Yeah, actually, the story
youngest son of Giovanni.
the story goes back even further, back to the 1940s, when Michelle's father, Pietro, began with a bakery shop. And in those days, post-war in the 40s, chocolate was being rationed. So they had to come up with an idea of making these special desserts and chocolate-style products without chocolate. So he came up with the idea, living in Piedmont, of using hazelnuts, grinding them to a fine paste and mixing them with chocolate. It's what we call ghianduja. So I really am a chocoholic. And initially, this was sold as a solid. So it wasn't this wonderful, smooth, creamy texture that we...
Like a bar
exactly.
of crunched
Yes, that's right. Yes.
hazelnuts.
Yeah. So Pietro's pasta ghianduja was a paste, and it wasn't a paste. Sorry, it was sold in a brick that was designed to be sliced and eaten with bread. The shops would hand out small tasters for people to try out with the bread, and this is what helped apparently widen the product's appeal. Now, the name goes back to 1964, apparently, when Ferrero rebranded the hazelnut paste and launched it in the UK. And last year was its 50th anniversary. And Italy apparently released 2.7 million stamps featuring a jar of Nutella. Now, that's what I call style. But really where they hit the big time was once they... was in 1988 when Nutella actually sponsored the Azzurri's shirt. So they became the main sponsor of the shirt for the Italian football team. And this took the brand across the world. And that was the tipping point. So for 48 years, they were slogging away, getting bigger and bigger. But then from 1988, it became this global giant, started to become this global giant that we now know now.
And how did it move from this jar of Nutella to Ferrero Rocher? So they at some point they started to create these little chocolates, or you haven't said that already, have you?
No. What I think all I said was that Ferrero started. It was called Ferrero, but then they rebranded the actual Ganduja paste, which we know as Nutella, back in the 1960s, and then they grew massively from that point. I presume they became more acquisitive, started buying other manufacturing and products, and then now they make 40% of Tic Tacs in Cork.
In Ireland. Wow.
In Ireland, that's right. Yep.
And you said something about Kinder eggs as well. Was that a separate story?
I don't know too much about Kinder eggs other than my kids love them. You know, they still love them, and my youngest is 20 now, and still loves Kinder eggs.
And it's the branding. Somehow there's I wonder how many people know what actually is in a Ferrero Rocher. Most people might think it's actually chocolate. It's got a hazelnut in the centre, and then it's got this Nutella type.
Correct. The Ganduja paste and then the wafer.
That's the Ganduja paste.
With a little bit of chocolate and a sprinkling of chopped hazelnuts.
And it's the gold wrapping, the very specific box, and also the connection with embassies, wasn't it? So that
correct.
It's actually served. I bet it's never served. Certainly not now. It's never served.
I don't think so.
At diplomatic parties. But there was a great implication as a schema of attaching this product to something as high,
making it a premium, high-end, aspirational product, I suppose.
And it's a high-end cost as well, but still. It's a lovely taste. And there are other chocolates out there, we know that.
You don't want to. You're trying to get some free samples here.
No.
I
have to be very balanced. We have to be very balanced in our presenting here, because
I really love the new, actually, because there's another version of Ferrero Rocher, which is made by Ferrero, but it's got an almond in the centre and this wonderful white chocolate and then covered in coconut. So I ate myself sick of those over Christmas.
I haven't seen that. So that's a story. So rags to riches, and also a story of how that's our story of this week, if you like, of how to take something that you've got an abundance of. The other idea was Bailey's Irish Cream, I think, where they got lots of cream, and they have got lots of hazelnuts or something, and somebody came up with a new recipe.
And interesting, that's actually the origination of peanut butter, because back in, I think in the 1800s, down in the deep south, there was a glut of peanuts, and they didn't know what to do with the peanuts, so they found different recipes, tried to create different products out of them, and one of them was peanut butter.
So it actually would be interesting to look at the origins of some of the things that we take for granted today, like Bailey's Irish, which started a whole new range of liqueur products. Before that was kind of the Cointreau and
Grand Marnier.
Grand Marnier. Remember that that ad with the Grand Marnier? And then suddenly with these...
The ice melts. I remember that.
I do too. You put me off. The Bailey's Irish Cream and all those other the brands of cream liqueurs that sell in phenomenal quantities. So if we've got something for business and we've got something, sometimes it's a step back and say, what have we got an excess of? Or even something like last time we had the guy who was creating products out of waste products. Something.
It's almost like necessity is the mother of invention, to use an expression.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Just something you've got a new member of the family, haven't you?
Oh, we have indeed.
Just say something about that.
Yeah.
We play a request.
Wonderful. I was thinking of a child is born. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Okay, you tell us the story.
Okay. So, congratulations to my stepson Wayne and to his lovely wife Helen, and welcome young Rogan. Now, my wife is... I've got to be very careful with the expression I use now. My wife likes to claim she's got auburn hair, but I think she's a beautiful redhead. And so you can imagine the wonderful shock of hair that Rogan has, which is why he's called Rogan, which is a wonderful Irish name meaning...
red.
Yep.
And in case you're wondering why we were playing When a Child is Born by Johnny Mathis, which is normally played at Christmas time, that was to celebrate the birth of Rowan.
My grandson.
So Wisdom's grandson. And congratulations to Wayne and Helen and Caroline and Carol. So final run up through Wisdom's 10 tops tax tips. These are the top tips of the week. Which Wisdom is going to share with us on how we can... What's the word we want to use now? You tell me what's the appropriate word we should be using.
That's really tough. Evasion? No.
No.
Avoidance?
No.
No.
Saving.
Tax savings. Okay.
Efficient.
Efficiency. Tax efficiency.
Using the tax rules efficiently.
Not a trace of vanilla anywhere.
No vanilla here. No.
Right. This is actually thank you to Mark McLaughlin from Tax Insider for these ideas. These are really Valentine themed, and I know we've just missed Valentine's Day, but maybe if you haven't quite done anything for your beloved, here are some ideas. So the first one, I'm going to tell you whether these are related to if you're self-employed or a business person, or if you're an individual, or you've got a range of different types of income streams. So there's something here for everyone. So if you've got a business or a limited company, well, why don't you give your beloved a Valentine's Day gift? You can take advantage of the Tax Act, CTA, and to give your Valentine a gift of up to £50, and that will be tax deductible from your business.
So a wife can give her husband £50
if she runs a business.
If she's running her own business.
Correct. And if it's regarded as a gift to somebody slightly business related.
I'm just thinking, who would be sitting in a dark room thinking that one up, that would be so exciting. £50.
Okay. If you're not happy with that one, try this one. Dermot, come on.
No, I'm not you bringing it up, but I'm thinking about the people at the tax office actually saying, let's introduce some things that people would find really exciting, and that's one they came up with.
I don't think they deliberately tried to make it useful for people, but rather I think it was just a recognition that sometimes you give gifts to business contacts, whether they're suppliers, colleagues, people you talk to,
and that extends to your spouse.
Well, I think if your spouse works for you, absolutely. And if you wanted to talk to her about some business connection. All right, we're getting a little bit tenuous here, I can see.
And the next one.
Is
that number 10?
Leon.
I should have the
top tips.
Top tip. I should have some music in the background. Do.
Yeah, or countdown music. Yeah. How about a candlelit dinner for two?
I'm liking this more.
No, I'm not asking you.
With this 50, I could do this with the £50, of course.
No. With candlelit dinner for two, if both of you work for the business, then it's £150 each can be spent on an annual party. And if you want to make this something even more romantic for all your employees, why not change your Christmas party to Valentine's Day and take everybody out? £150 would go a long way, I'm sure.
So £150
per person.
Per person,
correct. Yep.
Is this purely for Valentine's Day? Are you serious here?
Well, okay. I suppose I'm stretching the envelope and being a little bit creative, or Mark certainly was being a little bit creative. So it's an annual party. It used to be called a Christmas party, but now it's an annual party.
And it can happen any time of the year, and particularly it could happen at Valentine's Day.
It could do, yes, as long as it's no more than £150 per person.
Right.
Okay, so how about this one then? This is for somebody who perhaps has a shares or other a rental property income. You can carry on giving. If your partner has unused personal allowances, well, you can give them one of your assets, supposing a group of shares or a property. And the idea is that you give them the rental income or the income stream. And there's a exemption on no gain, no loss on transferring assets from one spouse to another. And then they would get the income stream and it would be applied against their personal allowance and so pay no tax. So that's the way they would benefit there.
Excellent.
Oh, yes, I can see you're thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. All right, well, how about this one?
Okay.
How about if your partner or your spouse doesn't have a pension scheme or they need a top-up, you can pay up to £3,600 into their pension scheme and, of course, get the benefit of a taxable deduction.
That sounds good.
And that would work even potentially if your partner didn't have any earnings, because normally there is a limit on the amount you can pay into your pension fund based on the amount of your earnings. But that would work even if they didn't have earnings.
Okay, good.
I can see you're sitting on the edge of your seat there.
I'm moving closer to the edge of my seat.
Yeah, more like moving closer to the door, I think. Okay, so if you're both basic rate taxpayers, you can transfer... one partner can transfer part of the personal allowance, unused personal allowance, to the other partner. But there's a limited effect, and this is all about giving. I give you my allowances.
Okay. I like this. I think this is giving this is what we should have more of.
Absolutely, yeah. But the only trouble with this is, I should never use the word but, should I? There is one limitation to this issue, is that the value is probably only going to be worth about £230. But as my old boss used to say, it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. And I know that doesn't sound very romantic.
No, not at all. Not in the least bit. Moving on.
Moving swiftly on, okay. So, how about leaving everything in your will to your partner? All right, yeah, I'm really stretching and scraping the barrel now. So the idea is that if you leave everything in your will to your partner, you're also transferring to them your nil rate band for inheritance tax. So you're not just giving them a band, but it's your nil rate band.
And is that different to somebody who's married, so a partner?
It will be someone who's married. I say partner, but this is most of these relate to people who are married, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that way you transfer your £325,000 band to them, and then they will have the combined rate when they finally leave their assets to their children of £650,000. So that will be tax-free for inheritance tax.
Excellent. And the next one.
And the next one. Right. I'm going to have to skip through these notes very, 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 very quickly.
Let's have two more.
Okay, two more. Right. So if you're asking the question, you could buy a ring. Obviously, if you're popping the question, you're buying a diamond ring or an engagement ring. And if it's worth up to £6,000, then it will be subject to an exemption from capital gains tax. So clearly a diamond ring may increase in value or it may decrease in value. But that's one way to transfer an asset to them, an engagement asset, without an escape capital gains tax.
So you could buy a ring for £6,000 and give it to your beloved as a gift, and that's a way of saving tax.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how that conversation would go.
Exactly, darling.
You'd want to have a conversation beforehand, you know. And at which point do you declare your interest? At which point do you declare your interest in this? The reason why you're doing it, this wonderful, generous gift.
Okay, and now here's the last one. I think we better end there. So you can point out to your beloved that they will soon be able to inherit your individual savings accounts, your ISA tax advantages. So the government proposes to allow savers an additional ISA allowance with effect from the 6th of April 2015, where their spouse or civil partner dies on or after the 3rd of December 2014. So this is the ultimate in romance, isn't it?
You've really pulled the stops out today.
Absolutely.
And there's a loose connection. I'll see the loose connection with the romance of Valentine's Day.
Stretch credibility to its very limit.
Some stretching there of credibility.
Right.
But it's been really entertaining, informative, and wise, as we would expect in equal measure.
The hint of sarcasm there.
Wisdom, we're coming to the end of the programme. It's gone whoosh. It's gone whoosh. It's been great. It's been great presenting with you this afternoon. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it too.
I have indeed, Dermot. And great to
dear
be
listener,
able to be of service to our listeners.
I hope that the listeners have enjoyed it too. If there's any queries or questions, if you want to get more information about what we've been talking about this afternoon, especially the 10 top tips that Wisdom has been talking about, then you can email us on Marlow FM. So would you email us at studio@marlowfm.co.uk. That's email studio@marlowfm.co.uk. And thank you very much for listening. And Wisdom and I will be back with you in 2 weeks' time on Thursday afternoon for Biz Buzz. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of the week.